Who is the one aware of awareness? The Buddha's deepest question. There's a question that lives at the edge of what the mind can grasp. It's not answered in books, and philosophy can't solve it through reasoning. Yet every person who has tried to watch their own mind eventually encounters it. And when you truly meet this question, something in you stops. The question is deceptively simple. When you are aware of a thought, of a feeling, what exactly is aware of that awareness itself? We assume there's a me watching, knowing, being conscious. We feel it so intimately we rarely question it. But the Buddha didn't stop at comfortable assumptions. He kept looking until he found something that would liberate the human mind from its deepest bondage. The bondage we don't even know we're in. And this bondage is subtle beyond measure. It's not chains we can see or iron bars we can break. It's the assumption, so deeply ingrained we've forgotten it's an assumption, that there must be a someone behind all experience. This assumption colors every moment of our lives, every decision, every reaction, every fear, every hope. It's the invisible architecture of suffering itself. Today we're following that investigation, not to accumulate knowledge, but to see something directly. This is about the end of a suffering that runs so deep, we've mistaken it for who we are. And the investigation begins exactly where you are right now, with this simple act of being aware, reading these words, and wondering what, if anything, is doing the knowing. Right now, become aware of your breathing. Notice the rise and fall, the sensation of air moving. You're aware of the breath. There's knowing happening. Now notice that you're aware of being aware. There's awareness of the breath, but also awareness that you are aware. You can step back and watch yourself watching. But here's where it gets interesting. If you can be aware of your awareness, then what is aware of that awareness of awareness? Every time you think you've found the final awareness, there seems to be something aware of that too. It's like standing between two mirrors, reflections upon reflections, with no end. This isn't a word game. This is the lived experience of anyone who has genuinely tried to find the one who knows. The rational mind has only a few options, and all of them lead nowhere. There must be a final awareness that can never be an object, a pure subject. But if this can never be known or experienced, how do you know it exists? Or perhaps awareness is self-aware, knowing itself in the same moment it knows everything else. But something would have to be both knower and known simultaneously, like a finger trying to touch its own tip. The very structure of knowing requires separation. How can knower and known be the same? This is the fundamental confusion at the heart of human suffering. As long as there's a me watching, there's fear of this me ending, craving to make it complete, the exhausting project of maintaining a self that cannot even be located. And here's what makes this paradox so troubling. It's not just philosophical. Even those who have gone far on the path still find themselves stuck at this final edge. In Kamaka Sutta, Venerable Kamaka, an anagami who had eliminated sensual craving and ill will, was asked, "Do you still regard anything in the five aggregates as self?" His answer, "Friends, I do not say I am form, nor I am feeling, nor I am perception, nor I am mental formations, nor I am consciousness. I do not regard anything as self or as belonging to self. Yet the notion I am has not yet vanished." He had seen through every possible identification. He knew that none of the five aggregates was him. And yet, there remained this sense, I am. Not I am this or I am that, just I am. The bare sense that there is knowing happening and something that knows. This is asmimana, the conceit I am. Not pride, but something far more fundamental. The sense of being a subject, of existing as a center point around which experience revolves. Its existence experienced as someone existing, rather than simply existence occurring. And if someone as accomplished as 𝐂𝐴𝐽𝐸 still encountered this sense of something knowing, then this paradox is not trivial. It's not something you can think your way out of. It's the final knot, the ultimate confusion, the deepest assumption consciousness makes about itself. The text says that while discussing this very question, liberation happened for 𝐂𝐴𝐽𝐸 suddenly and completely. But how? How did a paradox with no logical solution suddenly resolve itself? How did the sense of something knowing dissolve when even talking about it seemed to require someone doing the talking? This is the mystery we're investigating. Not for intellectual curiosity, but because understanding how this knot unties is understanding the end of suffering itself. To see how, we need to look at what the Buddha discovered about consciousness, not as a thing, but as a process. Not as something existing independently, but as something arising and ceasing based on conditions. We need to see the mechanism by which the illusion of the knower gets constructed, moment by moment, thought by thought. The Buddha was a physician of the mind. His question was always practical. How does suffering arise, and how does it cease? When he looked at consciousness through profound meditation clarity, he didn't see a thing. He saw a process, a chain of events arising so quickly that the illusion of continuity fooled everyone. And he saw exactly where the sense of me gets fabricated. In the Madhupindika Sutta, the Buddha taught, with contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels, one perceives. What one perceives, one thinks about. What one thinks about, one proliferates. Let's watch how this works. Right now, your eyes meet light, ears meet sound. When sense organ, object, and consciousness come together, that's contact. Notice, there's no you involved yet. It's impersonal, automatic. Immediately, feeling arises, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The body-mind's basic response: approach, avoid, or ignore. This still isn't personal. Then perception gives it a label. That sound becomes music. That sensation becomes pain. Recognition happens. We're getting closer to me, but not quite there yet. Next, thinking arises about what was perceived. This music reminds me of summer. I like this. The mind weaves a story. Finally, proliferation. The mind takes a simple thought and spins endless variations. But more than that, this is where I crystallizes. I am hearing this music. I like it. I am someone with good taste. I am generous. I am. From simple contact to a fully constructed self. And it happened so fast you didn't notice. This is happening constantly, building the overwhelming sense of a me at the center. But here's the insight. The person is not the starting point. It's the end product. The sequence can happen without any self, right up until thinking and proliferating. And this is crucial, because if the self is the end product, not the beginning, then it's optional. It's something that gets added, not something that was there from the start. The raw experiencing can happen without anyone experiencing it. In the 𝐿 Sutta, the Buddha taught monk sati, apart from a requisite condition, there is no coming into play of consciousness. Consciousness that arises in dependence on the I and forms is called I consciousness. Consciousness doesn't stand alone. It's a process arising when conditions come together, ceasing when they fall apart. No conditions, no consciousness. Like fire, inseparable from fuel and oxygen. Yet the sense of me knowing feels so immediate. How can that be illusion? Here's the test from 𝐂𝐴𝐿𝐴 Sutta. The Buddha taught, were consciousness self, this consciousness would not lead to affliction, and one could have it of consciousness. Let my consciousness be thus. Let my consciousness not be thus. If consciousness were truly yours, you could command it. But you can't. Thoughts arise whether you want them or not. Consciousness ages, declines, depends on conditions you don't control. Where is I am consciousness? This is anatta, not self. Not saying you don't exist. Saying what you think you are, the thing that owns consciousness, is misperception. There's no owner, just process flowing, depending on conditions. But there's crucial warning. In 𝐂𝐴𝐻𝐸𝐺 Sutta, the Buddha taught, everything exists. This is one extreme. Nothing exists. This is the other extreme. Avoiding both extremes, the Tathagata teaches a doctrine of the middle. Not nihilism, nothing exists. Not eternalism, something permanent exists. But middle way, processes arising when conditions are present. This middle way is not compromise between two views. It's the recognition that both views miss what's actually happening. The dynamic, moment-by-moment arising and ceasing that is neither a permanent something nor an absolute nothing. Applied to awareness, there's definitely knowing happening, but we don't need a separate thing that knows behind it all. The knowing is what happens when conditions come together. The miracle isn't that there's someone knowing. The miracle is that knowing happens at all, without anyone doing it. Understanding intellectually is just the first step. Real transformation happens when you see this directly. That's where practice comes in. The Buddha didn't teach theory for its own sake. Every insight pointed toward direct investigation you can do yourself. In Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught, a monk lives contemplating the body in the body, ardent, clearly knowing and mindful. That phrase, body in body, 𝐾𝐴 𝐾𝐴 doesn't say, I contemplate my body. It points to knowing that doesn't assume a separate knower. When you start practicing, naturally there's me observing breath. But as you continue, it becomes harder to find the separate observer. When you try to find the you noticing, what do you find? Just more noticing, but no separate entity. Here are 4 steps that cut through the chain. Step 1. Label phenomena without labeling a subject. When thought appears, just note, thinking, thinking. When emotion arises, sadness, sadness. No I, no me, no mine. Why? Remember the proliferation chain from Madhupindika Sutta. The me crystallizes in thinking and elaborating. By labeling before that happens, you intervene early. You're meeting experience at perception before it becomes my experience. Step 2. Immediately recognize the 3 characteristics. After labeling thinking, add impermanent, changing, fading. See directly that thought already changing. By seeing impermanence in real time, you cut off proliferation. Step 3. When you notice the knowing, apply the same method. You'll think, wait, something is knowing all this. The moment this arises, label, knowing, knowing. Then see, knowing arising, knowing ceasing. This directly addresses our original paradox. Even the awareness behind everything is just phenomenon arising and passing with conditions. When you shine awareness on awareness itself, you find it's not solid, not permanent. This is what happened to Venerable 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐽. While speaking about the subtle sense of something knowing, while bringing attention to it, it dissolved. When you look directly, not thinking about it but actually observing, you find it's just another arising, another passing. Step 4. Natural release. When you've truly seen the impermanence and not-self nature of phenomena, including knowing itself, there's natural letting go. Not that you do it, it happens on its own. Practically, you're sitting, thought arises, I'm worried about tomorrow. Old way. Get caught in story, replaying failures. New way. Thinking, worry, worry. You label without I. Impermanent, changing. The thought is morphing. Cannot control, not mine. It's arising from conditions, tiredness, past experience. None personal. Then, there's knowing of this worry. Immediately. Knowing, arising, ceasing. The awareness of worry isn't stable either. There's no solid you behind it all. Just process. Something shifts. The worry isn't your worry. It's just phenomenon in awareness not owned by anyone. From that place, wise response arises naturally. And what's remarkable is that the response is often wiser, more compassionate, more appropriate than anything the worried self could have manufactured. Because it's not coming from the contracted place of me and my problem. It's coming from clarity itself. This is the difference the Buddha taught in Mahavadala Sutta. Venerable Sariputta explained, wisdom should be developed, while consciousness should be completely understood. Consciousness organized around subject-object, creating sense of self. This needs to be seen through. Wisdom is different knowing, seeing nature of things without creating knower. Consciousness says, there is pain. Wisdom sees, pain is impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. No, I needed. And here's something profound. Wisdom doesn't feel distant or cold. When you see pain as impermanent, as not self, there's often a warmth that arises, a tenderness even. Because you're no longer fighting with reality, no longer trying to make impermanent things permanent, or trying to own what was never yours. There's a relaxation, a settling, a deep okayness with things as they are. You don't have to be enlightened for moments of this wisdom. Anytime you see impermanence directly, see something can't be controlled, see experience happening without experiencer, that's wisdom arising. These moments accumulate, deepen, until the shell breaks open. We started with a paradox. What is aware of awareness? The Buddha's genius was showing the question itself arises from fundamental misperception. We organize experience around subjects and objects because that's how language works. But reality doesn't come pre-divided this way. When you see directly, not as idea but lived reality, that consciousness arises only when conditions come together. something fundamentally changes. The question, what is aware of awareness, simply stops arising. Not because you found an answer, but because you saw the question was wrongly framed. Like asking, what holds up the earth? When you understand gravity, the question dissolves. Not because you answered it, but because you saw it was based on false assumption. Similarly, when you see awareness is not thing but process, that knowing happens when conditions align, that even the subtle sense of something knowing is just another arising and passing, the search for ultimate knower ends. Because you understood there was never anything to find, and in that ending, extraordinary freedom. As long as you believe there's you at center needing protection, life is stressful. But when you see there's no you in ultimate sense, no fixed entity, no permanent essence, all that falls away, because you stopped believing in something never real. What remains is experience arising moment by moment, without burden of someone to whom it's happening. This is freedom from constant effort of being a self, from fear and craving, from suffering that comes from making the impersonal flow personal. And this is available now. Put down these words. Notice awareness happening. Notice thoughts, sensations, breathing. Then ask, honestly, directly, can you find the you who's aware? Can you locate the knower as something separate from knowing? Look carefully. What do you actually find? If you look honestly, you'll find awareness happening, but no one doing it. Knowing occurring, but no thing that knows. Just process, just this. And in that seeing, even if just a flash, there's glimpse of what the Buddha pointed to. Moment of freedom. The Buddha encouraged, come and see. Investigate for yourself. This is still the invitation. Not to believe in not-self as doctrine, but to look and see if you can find a self. The question, what is aware of awareness, was never meant to be answered with words. It's meant to be looked at. To turn your attention back on itself, investigate the structure of knowing, until you see directly there's no one behind it all. Just this. Awareness arising moment by moment, dependent on conditions, empty of permanent essence, yet luminous, present, undeniable. This is what the teachings call nibbana, the deathless. Not because it's eternal thing you attain, but because when you see there's no you to be born, there's no you that can die. What dies is illusion. What was never born doesn't fear death. What remains is just this moment, just this breath, just this knowing, without burden of being yours, without fear of being lost, without need to be anything other than what it is. What is aware of awareness? Look and see, not with thinking, but with attention. Not tomorrow, but now. The answer is not in concepts. The answer is in the looking itself. And when you truly look, when awareness turns fully back on itself with no one looking, no thing being looked at, that's where words end. That's where the teaching steps back. That's where you walk alone. This is freedom. This is peace. This is the end of suffering. Not because difficult experiences stop, but because there's no longer anyone to whom they happen.